It has only been 50 days and I didn't want to do a video on anything for 100 to give the Prime Minister a chance to fix stuff, but my word, this speech that he's just made is awful.
I promised that we would get a grip on the problems that we face.
Main concern are like the workers. Finding staff is an absolute nightmare.
And that we would be judged by our actions, not by our words.
I'm the manager of this place and I can't find valuable people.
Growth, and frankly by that I do mean wealth creation, is the #1 priority of this Labour government.
How do you think Brexit has impacted this business, or has it?
Very hard to actually sell into Europe now because you can't risk, it being stuck at a post office somewhere or the custom forms filled in incorrectly. So you just don't risk it.
I would say for me it only changed in the fact that I was able to sell in all Europe, and now I had to stop.
There is always now short of stuff in terms of all the sectors. Like, you hardly get stuff these days. I hear that there is so many business actually shut down because they didn't have enough stuff there.
We discovered a £22 billion black hole in the public finances.
Wait until he finds out there's a 40 billion black hole from Brexit.
That's what we've inherited. Not just an economic black hole, a societal black hole. And that's why we have to take action and do things differently. And part of that is being honest with people.
And honesty is such an important value, and I'm sure that's part of the reason why he's in office right now, because people didn't trust, with good reason, the Conservative Party. However, this speech and the way the media handled Keir Starmer afterwards with their questions was dishonest. I just showed you a series of clips showing the damage of Brexit, and we've got a Prime Minister saying he wants to be honest, and yet he and the media are completely ignoring the 40 billion black hole that is Brexit.
About the choices that we face, how tough this will be. And frankly, things will get worse before they get better.
And there's two things to that. That means, by the sounds of it, he's going to implement austerity too. But the other thing, you cannot fix a problem unless you recognise it, and he is not recognising the damage of Brexit.
The Centre for Economic Reform claims the government has lost out on £40 billion in taxes because of the damage done to the country's output by leaving the European Union.
And this week we've seen a shocking number of news stories coming out about the damage caused by Brexit, from charge bills starting to go into the food industry. And within that, you've got the price of food and takeaway going up to almost astronomical levels. And according to the BBC, some of this has increased by up to 50% in cost. Again, remember what they said about Brexit.
Even if things did go wrong, let's just assume that things went wrong.
Yeah.
But the worst case scenario, economically, is better than where we are today and gives us the chance to start thinking globally and, by the way, bringing prices down for consumers.
Forecasts made by Patrick Minford and his team at Cardiff University and assume that we cut the cost of food, clothing and footwear, which face very high tariffs and non-tariff barriers inside the European Union. That increases people's disposable income, makes the poorest in society better off, and would lead to an economic boom. Lots of countries around the world trade on a WTO basis. We can prosper on that basis. We would set our own tariffs. We could have cheaper food, clothing and footwear straight away by getting rid of the protectionist anti-trade tariffs that the EU imposes.
What are the biggest tariff areas under the customs union? Food, clothing and footwear. Who spends the highest percentage of their income on food, clothing and footwear? The poor, thank you.
And yet, as I've just shown you, that hasn't happened. And then, interestingly with this, British Airlines are forced to fly planes to the US for repairs because of Brexit rules, costing up to $500,000 extra. And it isn't just that. I'm aware of fishermen having to take their ships in the channel to get repaired to Holland, which means more costs have been added.
We sell donuts, churros, chocolate strawberries. Been up here a couple of years now, and times are harder than ever.
Do you think that Brexit has had an impact on your business?
I think it has, because it's made it. Look, for instance, with our churros, we use Spanish wheat flour. So for us to import it is more awkward and more expensive. That's £5 then, please. Export, import, prices have gone up.
People aren't coming over, the flights are more expensive, it's harder for them to get in here.
People, rather than coming to London, because they've now got to go for the hassle of getting into the country, so a lot of French people are going to Rome or somewhere else. We're, 4 weeks away from Christmas, and you've got empty stalls at the market, which is crazy.
And these vacancies exist in the NHS, with the House of Lords claiming that there is 133,446 vacancies in the NHS. And when you bring this up with Brexiteers such as Nigel Farage, they say...
And that is a misapplication of the Australian point system.
We've lowered the salary threshold.
Yes.
Because we've got 165,000 vacancies in social care and over 100,000 vacancies
we've also got,
in the NHS. No, hang on, deal with that point. That's why...
We've got 5.3 million. 5.3 million people living in this country of working age who are not working.
Well, many of those are working.
Who are not working.
Many of those are working. And they
illegally?
use universal... No, they use universal credit to top up their low wages.
We are not. We've de-skilled our people. You look at sectors, that graph you just showed in science, for example.
27% are students, 26% are long-term sick, 22% are carers, and 13% are retired. And the reason I've mentioned all of this to you in that long diatribe of damage is because they're all connected to Brexit. And yet the Prime Minister has just told us that he wants to be honest and he wants to repair and he wants growth. And yet he hasn't mentioned any of that to the public. The sign says fixing foundations. The logos, the promotion in the general election was about honest government. And it's not there. We have a 22 billion black hole, and 40 billion of that black hole, or part of that black hole, or on top of that black hole, has been created by Brexit. And that's according to multiple sources.
There were figures published just before Christmas, which you probably saw. The government, Brexit has cost the government £40 billion a year in lost tax revenue. What, as a very leading businessman, what has the impact of Brexit been on business generally in the UK?
It's been catastrophic.
Now, businesses say they feel like they're banging their heads against a brick wall over improving trade with the European Union. That's according to the British Chambers of Commerce, which says its members are still struggling with the UK's post-Brexit trading arrangements.
How much stronger would the economy be if we'd stayed in the EU?
We think that in the long run, it reduces our overall output by around 4% compared to had we remained in the EU.
How would you describe 4%, though? Would that be the equivalent of another conflict or a smaller pandemic?
It's a shock to the UK economy of the order of magnitude of the sorts of other shocks that we've seen from the pandemic, from the energy crisis. Those have also had percentage point impacts on the level of output in 5-10 years' time.
What we've experienced over the last decade and more has been partly self-inflicted, without question. Brexit, without doubt, has made us poorer than we otherwise would have done.
Farming is collapsing in Britain right now because of Brexit.
But I'm joined by a particularly distinguished Professor of Economics at King's College London and former Chief Economist at the Cabinet Office, Jonathan Portes.
The big evidence, I'm afraid, of the last 6 or 7 years is that things like uncertainty and the cost of Brexit actually have a more damaging impact on investment than the headline rate of corporation tax, because what the OBR says is we've now got pretty clear evidence that Brexit has reduced investment, and that's one of the reasons why the growth forecast going forward is so dismal.
The UK economy as a whole has been permanently damaged by Brexit. It's reduced the economy's potential output significantly, eroded business investment. I mean, look, if we hadn't had Brexit, we probably wouldn't be talking about an austerity budget this week. The need for tax rises, spending cuts, wouldn't be there if Brexit hadn't reduced the economy's potential output so much.
What I do think is we haven't actually benefited from Brexit economically.
With a sentence like that, it almost feels as if Nigel Farage has been more honest about this than our Prime Minister.
8 years after the Brexit vote, cheques that have already been delayed 5 times finally arrive at the UK border. From today, European food and plant imports considered at risk of carrying disease will face inspection. But industry says adding checks will increase food inflation by adding costs for importers and consumers.
We think there's going to be £1 billion worth of extra cost put onto food coming through Dover Port alone. So restaurants, delicatessens, fish and chip shops could well be affected by what's currently happening today, and the consumer in the very near future will start to see some of those food products going up in price.
When Britain was in the EU, food and the people who made it could move freely into the UK, but a hard Brexit means friction at the border. A wide variety of foods, including cheese, cured meat, will now face inspection, adding cost, delay and bureaucracy.
We need three things: growth, growth, growth.
Let's rewind this speech just a little bit, and I'm going to show you a set of predictions that came out from the US, but also align with what he's just said here.
The deal is a thin agreement. It does not provide adequate protections for British manufacturing, our financial services, creative industries, or workplace rights. It is not the deal that the government promised. Far from it.
Bearing that in mind, what he's just said, it sounds like he wants to reset the deal, and this is what we're hearing in the press over and over again. I thought I'd give you the American perspective on Brexit from 2017-18, from the US Embassy discussing the damage, but also how Brits don't seem to understand the position that we're in.
The EU 27 says, we're a club, here are our rules. You tell us how many of the rules you're prepared to accept, and we'll kind of tell you where in the clubhouse you can go.
And I think this was a litmus test with the EU and the UK to see what the boundaries were. And of course, the UK and Starmer rejected it.
That is not the British conception of what this is at all. They sort of see it as a negotiation between two equal parties.
And it's about to get worse because the guy from the UK Embassy is about to say something about the Tories that Starmer has just done in his speech.
But the British government is not interested really in telling people, you know, this thing that 52% of you said that you wanted. You know, here are the range of options. There's, you know, less good, and then there's very, very bad. So, and they haven't actually done a lot of sort of macroeconomic modeling of this, almost like deliberately, like we don't want to know because, you know, leaving is going to be great and it's what people voted for. So let's not spend government money on analysis that suggests that maybe people got it wrong.
You know, growth is starting to slow down, but what we're probably going to see is a longer term, slower slide of lower economic growth. Inflation went up from 0.5% to 3%. So it's quite a significant increase. And that's not inflation from a growing, bubbly economy. That's inflation from an outside shock. So that's the worst kind of inflation. That's going to be a problem. This is coming at the end of a long period of austerity. People are very, very tired of it. They're very frustrated by it. And some of those longer term economic issues are some of the things that fuel Brexit. So if Brexit ends up not helping them or not obviously helping people economically, you know, that could have political knock-on effects.
Like the UK riots.
But if I think the economy sinks, then that's going to put political pressure on the government. And for the people that voted to leave, they're terrified because this is something they've been fighting to achieve for almost 40 years. I mean, it's a generational struggle. They've now won, and they're absolutely terrified that it's going to be snatched away from them.
Absolutely damning, and this is why the honesty part is so important, and we're not getting it, because he knows that this could cause further division in the country, but also these Brexiteers will hound him, and they have got important positions within the media. Do you agree with me? Leave your thoughts in the comments. Once again, a big thank you to all of my Patreon and YouTube supporters who keep this channel going and growing. If you would like to support the channel in that way, please look at the description, or you could even buy me a coffee. Doing so keeps me up at night, allowing me to make more videos like this. Once again, thanks for listening. Bye for now.